of the region's contribution to the Europe 2020 Midterm Review. And to do that, we will now hear from Madam Mercedes Bresso, the first Vice President of the Committee of the Regions.
Signori Ministri,
Ministers, colleagues, guests, Commissioner. Precisely 4 years ago, on the 3rd of March 2010, the European Commission adopted its new 10-year strategy to promote growth and jobs, which was dubbed the Europe 2020 strategy. At that particular point in time, our citizens, our economies and our countries were being hit by the toughest economic and financial crisis in the history of the European Union. That crisis can still be felt in many parts of Europe. We've just been hearing about that. We've heard how difficult the course has been from the Deputy Prime Minister. Over the 4 years since that point, the European Union has changed in many respects. It's changed in the way it's perceived by its citizens and the rest of the world. The Union has been forced to take a fresh look at its economic and financial governance in a way that none of us very probably would previously have imagined. Some member states found themselves in a position where they've not only had radically to change their public policies, and again we've just heard something about that, but they've also needed massive aid from the European Union. The crisis has, however, also had a significant and uneven impact on our regions and cities. After a long period of convergence, disparities amongst regions have started to grow again, and that is borne out by the 8th interim report from the Commission on economic, social and territorial cohesion. Between 2008 and 2012, unemployment has increased in 4 out of 5 European regions. In some member states, those who are hardest hit are young people. That's the case in Greece, where youth unemployment is over 50%. The percentage of people at risk of poverty and exclusion has also grown considerably. In particular, between 2008 and 2012, the number of people living in families with low work intensity, very low work intensity, that's a euphemism in many cases, has increased by over 7 million. Between 2008 and 2011, people at risk of poverty and exclusion have grown twofold in cities as opposed to non-urban areas. And that trend is particularly clear in the 15 longer-standing EU member states, where even before the crisis, cities were showing higher poverty and exclusion levels. Lastly, in recent years, public investment at the subnational level has been falling between 3 and 6% a year, and recently even worse. Clearly, the midterm review of the Europe 2020 strategy, which the committee is publishing its initial contribution to now, will have to take account of that context. When the Europe 2020 strategy was launched, the Committee of the Regions appreciated its balanced approach to growth and the definition of specific country objectives. However, the progress which has been accomplished up until now is not satisfactory, above all because of the crisis, but also because of the structure and the governance of the actual strategy itself. Over the last 15 months, the Committee of the Regions has carried out a detailed analysis of the results achieved by the strategy up until now. That analysis is based on figures garnered at a range of 7 conferences, one on each of the flagship initiatives, accompanied by the same number of surveys, which attracted input from over 1,400 stakeholders from regional and local levels, not just the administrations there, but the whole grassroots of society. During the course of those conferences, together with mayors, ministers, commissioners, academics, and local representatives, we looked at regional approaches and local projects and results of research and the findings of our surveys. We've also come up with more than 100 examples of best practice from cities, regions, and cross-border programs. Some of those best practices are demonstrated in the exhibition outside. You can also find a good example in the second volume of the Europe 2020 strategy annual for local and regional authorities. We've prepared the publication of that second volume for the purposes of this summit together with the Commission. So as you can see, we've done a lot of work. At the end of 2013, there was also an online consultation on the midterm review of the Europe 2020 strategy, which brought in over 1,000 replies from regional and local authorities in the 28 member states. Replies showed that in order to guarantee a coordinated delivery of the strategy, we needed to ensure that governance at every level is more closely involved in improving the definition of objectives. The importance of comparative analysis has been borne out in this process, together with the exchange of good practices, with long-term prospects for public finances, resources, and capacity building. The data we've gathered have pinpointed a number of the lacunae in the strategy, and particularly in the local and regional context. In our proposals on the use of European resources, we often see that they are regionalised or put on a local footing. For this midterm review of the Europe 2020 strategy, our findings have been summarised in the declaration we discussed this morning, and you'll find a more detailed account in the report on the midterm review, which we put out in conjunction with that declaration. At this point, I would like to turn in particular to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister from the Hellenic Presidency of the European Union and express a hope that in the future programming of the European funds and strategic planning can coincide, because at the moment we've had a situation where we've had one foot on either side of the former provisions and the new ones. It would be desirable to have the same time frame for everything. Now, to look at the results and recommendations that have been put together by the Committee of the Regions, to breathe some life into the second half of the strategy, shortly before the spring meeting of the European Council, we do hope that our voice will be heard. First of all, we have 7 conclusions. The Europe 2020 strategy needs a more specific territorial dimension. That means we need to define our goals on the basis of an approach which we differentiated depending on local realities and the local circumstances of the various territories, according to a mixed programming approach, upstream and downstream. Such an approach would create greater ownership and partnership. These are 2 fundamental elements, we think, because smart, sustainable and inclusive growth requires this if it's to get going, and Europe needs to restart in that direction. So renewing our Europe 2020 strategy along those lines will require us, and I'm turning here to the Commission, to have up-to-date regional data so that we can have a clear picture of the progress accomplished. If we only get the figures too far down the road, 2 or 3 years later, then obviously it's going to be difficult for us to monitor how our actions are working out on a day-to-day basis. The proposals from the Commission, Eurostat and the OECD are in the right direction, but I want to stress that we need to get the figures faster and keep them more up to date. The second conclusion is to do with the way national reform programs are worked out and implemented. This must involve multi-level governance partnership. Let me be clear about this. It's not enough just to consult the regions and cities. They are the ones who actually deliver the policies. They are the ones who have the local knowledge. They're closest to our citizens. They have to be the key players rather than just taking what's been decided by the national governments. Something's been improved in recent years, but there's a lot more scope for progress. We need negotiations on this. We've suggested that the partners should work on mutually agreed goals, and then the national reform programs should include a specific section devoted to governance, specifically explaining ways and means of involving regions, cities, and every level of local government in these programs. I need to speed up a bit. Thirdly, multi-level governance should become the standard approach of the Europe 2020 strategy. Here again, we started debating a charter this morning in which we set out our proposal regarding multi-level governance as we see it. Our fourth conclusion: it would be desirable for the European semester also to focus on long-term investment for the Europe 2020 strategy. European resources from the structural funds are not enough. They have to pursue other goals such as convergence. We think that if we're to make a reality of the goals in the strategy, we need more long-term investments. Those investments must be carried out by every level of government, of course on the basis of a healthy budget, without the search for a healthier footing for the budget undermining long-term investment and long-term strategies. So we need a sort of teaching approach, if you will. We should be encouraging local and regional authorities and governments, national governments, of course, to put resources into long-term investment, cutting down current expenditure, not investment. During the crisis, we've seen things going the other way. We're all too aware of that. As the European Parliament has said, and we of course agree, co-financing should not be included amongst the base which is addressed by austerity programs. Co-financing, as far as we're concerned, are to be used for these objectives. It's not something you can just keep paring down. National, regional, local government, as I say, must give priority treatment to investment, because investment is at a critically low level in certain member states already. Then we need to work on the flag initiatives to bring about greater coordination. The flagship initiatives have indeed inspired better actions for coordinating European, national and regional work. In all our findings, we have observed that the regions and localities have used them to modernize their strategies, regardless of the specific way the funds have been used. The flagship initiatives, then, need new action plans for the next 5 years, and there has to be this better coordination. How is that to be done? All too often, people get the impression that territorial policies are following two different agendas at present. One driven by the past, and the other linked to the Europe 2020 strategy. That latter is often only for the purposes of data presentation. Now, of course, we can do better than that. The sixth point, we need to do more with fewer resources. We have to come up with the funds for those long-term investments. Investments we need to achieve the goals of the Europe 2020 strategy have been calculated at something around 2 trillion euro. That means a prospect of long-term financing and better quality spending. In this context of the Union budget can only be seen as an incentive, probably an instrument that will have a knock-on effect in terms of investment. Nationally and at the subnational level, what we've seen happening is a contraction of revenue and an increase in social spending. Now, as I said, this has led to cuts in public investment, unevenly spread across the territory of the Union. We all need to work together in the Union if we're going to fulfill those goals. Local and regional authorities undoubtedly need to enhance their ability to spend better, resorting to innovative financial techniques and instruments that the EIB is examining, as well as private funds. With that in mind, in the Committee of the Regions, we've taken an initiative to organize an annual event to the state of public subnational funding in the Union. It's helpful if you want to assess the situation and see how you can get the job done. So we want the full picture. The seventh and last but not least, we need to strengthen administrative capacity. The lack of adequate administrative capacity is something you still find in many local bodies across the European Union. And this poses a major obstacle to working out, acting on and financing local strategies. Comparative analyses, exchange of experiences, and a process of getting to know one another better amongst regions and cities are vital in this respect. We know that the Commission will be stepping up its efforts to modernize public administration within the Union. We'd like to offer our full cooperation in that endeavour and stress the need for a coherent approach coordinated amongst the various directorates general responsible for structural funds, investment, and the other DGs. What are the next steps that we intend to take? Following this summit meeting, the Committee of the Regions will convey its assessment of the Europe 2020 Midterm review to the heads of state and government. We told the presidency representative about it. We'll be voicing our concerns and setting out our proposals on the eve of the European Council meeting on the 20th and 21st of March. With an eye to the Commission's public consultation on the midterm review, we will call on all regions and cities to take part. We'll invite committee members to look into the possibility, where possible, of organising national debates as a flanking measure to the public consultation. And at the end of this year, in conjunction with the presentation of future policy options for the Europe 2020 strategy review on the part of the Commission, we in the committee intend to put forward our plan containing specific proposals as to how we can make progress on the strategy over the second half of the decade. in terms of good governance affecting every level of government within the European Union. I would therefore invite you to send us your ideas and proposals over the coming months. Let us all work together so as to ensure that the second half of the period covered by the Europe 2020 strategy really will provide that impetus, provide some propulsion for growth on that smart, inclusive, sustainable base that we want for our union, our cities and our regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Bresso. And now, before